Well, as you know, one of the things that I absolutely love about my nightscape photography is actually exploring the landscape and getting out into the great outdoors and just checking out and seeing what's out there to shoot. So I'm very pleased to be out on location today at this spot. Now, this is the sleepy little country Victorian town of Llanelly. Now, most of you would never have heard of Llanelly. It's nestled in between a couple of other small towns. Most people just drive straight past. You can probably hear all the cars going past here now. But you know, there's one little piece of landscape here at Llanelly which I have driven past myself quite a number of times before and thought to myself, I've got to shoot there, I've got to shoot there, I've got to shoot there. And just the other night, I got back and actually did shoot here. So I'm going to show you around just to give you a feel for the place, and then I'll explain how I set up all of the shots whilst I was here. Now don't worry, I am standing on a railway track, but there's only one train a week that goes through here, and I reckon I could walk quicker than that train actually travels. Travels at about 4 a.m. in the morning. I've heard it plenty of times, and it's a freight train, and it just keeps going through here. It doesn't stop. But the reason I'm here, and the reason this town is of interest to me, is simply because of this silo complex, which is actually on the side of the railway tracks here. And I figured it would make a perfect foreground subject for a nightscape image. Now, I have shot plenty of silos in the past, and silos in this part of the world are very common because there's lots of cropping, lots of wheat and storage, and they used to store it in these silos. Now, in more recent days, that has not been the case, and they use trucks to transport wheat and grain all around the countryside. These are just sitting there unused. Now, a lot of you would have heard of the silo art that is being done around the countryside. They are absolutely phenomenal, beautiful artwork from all of the silos, and some of those make great nightscape subjects. This particular silo hasn't been painted. It's just sitting there, the highway over there, but it does have a perspective towards the east in particular, and that was my interest when I came here the other night. Now, just here in the daylight, looking at this perspective, I'm facing down towards the south, and with the camera angled down low like it is there, I reckon it would make a really good star trail image, because that's due south, straight down there behind the silo. Now, when I was here, I didn't shoot a star trail. I didn't have enough time to do that. So I think I'll make the effort to come back here and actually shoot a star trail, probably from this perspective, because there's plenty of open sky down there, and light painting the foreground here would look absolutely awesome. Now, I have been here before, and that was years ago, many years ago, and I remember shooting more towards the southwest perspective, because at the time I was looking for the Milky Way arch over the top. I didn't get it, and that's because I only had a 24mm lens with me. it wasn't wide enough to get enough of the silo. I did get some of the Milky Way above the silo. Not my finest work, but you know, that was it was probably 6 years ago, and I might do that shot again one day with a different lens, but this looks good. I might just put this in the memory banks and come back here at some future date. Now, as you can imagine, something as large as this is incredibly difficult to light paint because it's so big, and also because of the colour of it. Now, it's painted white. It's a dirty white, but it's white. So any light that you put on that will reflect a lot. So you have to be really careful not to get hot spots. One of the issues I faced when I was here the other night was that my torch battery was starting to get low in power. Didn't have any spare batteries with me, so I struggled a little bit with getting enough light onto this. So to combat that, I raised the ISO a little bit. So in these images, you'll notice my ISO is a little bit higher. But nevertheless, in normal circumstances, because it's so large, it takes an awful lot of work to get the light in all the right places. Now, one of the interesting things I had, it was both a blessing and a curse, I guess, is that this road is very busy at night. And so there was quite a few trucks travelling along the road down here. Now, what they did, obviously, was light some parts of the silo. And I did use just one little piece of that over in the building over there to complement my actual light painting. I reckon if there was a train coming way off down in the distance, because the angle would be a bit different and it hasn't got the trees to interrupt, that could light really some nice light on the side of the silo. But like I said, there's only one train a week. It wasn't running the night I was here, so I had to make use of what I was getting. Now, one of the other things which I hate about cars and trucks is that taillights, the red lights, are very distracting. Now, every time they put their brakes on, which is the corner down there, it's shone a lot onto the side of the white silo. So consequently, I had quite a bit of red light reflecting on the white of the silo, which I didn't want to use. I hate the red light. You know, I've got a thing about red lights in general, and they're much harder to get rid of red lights than white lights in your nightscapes. So from this angle here, if you look at the front of that building over there, that is facing the road. And so when the trucks were coming down, the front face of that building over there, and just a little bit on the side, was being lit by the headlights from the trucks. And that was good because I was situated quite a long way away. It was difficult for me to get light over there. And so that was just subtle enough light to give me the lighting I needed. And I was able to light the rest of the building from over here, which is fine. And combining those shots together, I think worked quite well. Now, one of the interesting things about shooting these light painted nightscape images is that I like to somehow highlight some of the little details. Now, this tank here, just sitting down on the ground, was one of those. And I thought, well, why don't I just put a bit of light onto that just to highlight that as an individual piece in the puzzle, if you like. And so that's what I did. Not very hard to do because you can see it's a metal construction, reflects the light a lot, so it just needed a little bit of light over the top. And you know, it's just one piece of the puzzle, but you know, sometimes that one piece is the thing that just connects all of the rest of the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, of course, the first thing that we have to determine before anything else is to work out where to place the camera and what direction I'm going to shoot. Now, as it worked out here, perfectly over here on the other side of the railway tracks, facing down towards the east. Now, this time of year in Australia, it's autumn, so it was May when I shot this, and the Milky Way core was coming up right between the two main parts of the building there. Now, how did I know that was going to be the case? Well, I'll give you 3 facts that happened. Firstly, I know just by a compass bearing where the Milky Way is going to be at that time of year. It's the same every year. I've talked a lot about this in the past. So compass bearing, 1. 2, I can line it up with photo pills. So I can get my photo pills app out, work out, yep, see it in real time. I'll show you that in a minute. But thirdly, I came here, look, this is a Bortle 2 sky. It's really dark here. So all I need to do is get out of the car, walk over here, sit here for a couple of minutes, and that Milky Way is shining as bright as day. I could see it with my eye. Now, I don't need any apps to work out where it is because I can see exactly where it is before I start. that does make it a lot easier. If it was not a Bortle 2 sky and it was lots of light pollution, it's a lot harder. I get that. And I know a lot of you guys are faced with light polluted skies. I'm really sorry about that. But here, it's nice and dark, and of course I can just eyeball it. It does make the whole process that much easier. So this is the process of using photo pills to work out exactly where something will be in the night sky. So we enable the app, and then we go down to night augmented reality, and it gives us a real-time view. Okay, so there it is in real time as it is right now. We just get our finger and scroll across the page until we see the Milky Way core come up, and you can see it there between these two parts of the building over there. And that's exactly how it was when I was here the other night. And then we just work out, well, that's it. That's exactly the direction that I need to face to get the shot that I'm after here. And it works beautifully. And I think that particularly for planning a shot like this during the daytime, so like it is right now, I can come here. Now, I've mentioned to you before that that's not the only method that you can use. And I use a simple compass. That is just a simple compass on the phone and work out where the Milky Way core is going to be. Now, the Milky Way core is always in the same place at the same time of year every year. Now, so what I do is I look up Stellarium. It's a fantastic piece of software which is a free download for desktop, also available as a mobile paid app. And it has grid lines, and it tells me all the latitude and the compass bearings. So all I need to do is work out the time that I'm going to be here roughly, or whenever the Milky Way core is coming up. And I know that it comes up at about 110, 120 degrees east, whilst here in my part of the world. It's going to be different depending on what part of the world you guys live in. So for here, it's about 110, 120 degrees. So all I do is I get my compass out here while I'm here in the daytime, and I get it out and work out, yep, that's where I need to be facing. Here we go. Perfect. And of course, as the night progresses, the Milky Way heads more towards the northeast, but that's okay. It's so big you can't miss it, especially when you're using a wide angle lens. I was using my 20mm lens, but if you're using wide angle lens, it's not going to be gone for hours. It's going to be there for a long time. Now, I know a lot of you that live in areas where there's lots more light pollution, etc., find that a lot more difficult to do. And sometimes if you arrive there in the completely wrong time of night, you can't see the Milky Way. I totally get that. And that's why the planning tools and aids like photo pills and Stellarium are so handy for us to get our head around where that Milky Way is going to be in the sky at any time of the year. Now, I'm very well aware that I harp on a lot about creative composition in most of my videos. And to be absolutely honest, I value composition as highly as any other part of my nightscape photography. And why is that? Well, I think it's because if I came here and the composition was poor, then I'm not going to get the highest quality shot that I possibly can. What I'm aiming for is to let every parameter of my photography line up. Composition, settings, sky conditions, Milky Way, all of those other things. And if I can't do that, then oftentimes I might just move on to somewhere else because I think it's that important. So for example, I'm getting my camera really low down here on this bank overlooking the scene here. And I know where my Milky Way is going to be. I've got it positioned between the two buildings, and the buildings, I guess, frame the Milky Way, and that's what I was after. One of the other important things was I didn't want my camera so low that I couldn't actually see the top of the silos, because the silos are quite high, as you can imagine, from the camera angle here. So there's always a bit of a trade-off between, where do I want that to be? The other thing is, the lower your tripod position is, and I've mentioned this plenty of times, the more the foreground becomes exaggerated. Now, a little bit of a exemption to that rule here is the fact that the foreground is actually a long way away. Probably I don't know, it's close to 100 meters away from me because it's so big. Now that has its pluses and its minuses. The pluses are focus won't be an issue. I can just focus on infinity and leave it there. No worries at all. Even the railway line here is far enough away to be in focus at infinity because it's probably 10 meters away from me. So that makes things a lot easier. But as far as other aspects of composition, I have a bit more wide angle distortion as I get my camera down lower, and these buildings are very straight edged, and I'm a big one for not liking wide angle distortion. So that's one of the reasons I like to use a 20mm focal length lens, because it has a little bit less distortion than say a 14 or a 15mm lens. That's just my personal preference. I'm certainly not telling you that you shouldn't be using those ultra wide angle lenses at a scene like this, because you can fit more in. You'll get all of the buildings. I had to chop this building off with my 20mm, but I have shot silos before with an ultra wide 14mm lens, and there's an awful lot of this leaning in on the edges, and I had to try and fix it up in Photoshop. When you do that in Photoshop or Lightroom, you will actually lose real estate on the corners around the edge. So you therefore need to overshoot or be pretty handy with the content aware tool in Photoshop. And you know, once you start getting into that territory, well, for me, that's not what I'm about. I would much prefer to get this as right as I can here in camera, get my composition the way I want it to be. And that's what I always strive for. Okay, so the question I'm sure a lot of you are asking me, well, what settings did I choose for this particular shot? So, firstly, I used my Nikon Z6 with the 20mm f1.8s lens. And I did my usual thing of shooting the night sky without any lighting on the foreground. Now, remember I said to you before that there was trucks going up and down this road. Now, that frustrated me somewhat because I had to keep trying to work between the traffic because they kept showing headlights and particularly taillights and red lights on the silo, which I didn't want to use. But in the end, I got 12 shots successfully without any lights of the background because I'm stacking for noise reduction. And even though I've got a great lens and camera combination, I still do this for most of my shoots now because it does make an immense amount of difference. So I shot f2.2, 10-second shutter speed at ISO 6400. I've been using those settings with this new lens because I know I can stop it down a bit, but I don't have to stop it right down because it's so sharp in the corners. And that was fantastic. Now, without moving the camera or the tripod position, so it's about down there where it is there now, one thing that I did extra to that was I shot 3 ambient long exposures. Now I did that because some of this foreground area down here I was having trouble light painting. Remember I said my torch battery was getting down and I was struggling to throw the light as far as I wanted to. So I took 3 images at f4 and 110-second shutter speed. So I put my camera into bulb mode, shot 110 seconds, and I kept the ISO up at 3200 for that. Now, typically I would probably lower the ISO for those longer shots, but in this case I was worried about the traffic, so I had to keep it up, shorten the exposure time. And that was just for the ambient. Now, I didn't use very much of that, to be absolutely honest, but I took 3 of them and I stacked those as well, because when you stack even those foreground shots, you greatly reduce the amount of noise that's in your shots. Now, a lot of you people are shooting with cameras that aren't great at high ISO and you get lots of noise. Well, I can highly recommend stacking for noise reduction. I use the Windows software Sequator, which is absolutely free, awesome piece of software, and I love it. I use it for most of my shots these days. Then I shot the foreground. So how I did that, I got off on angles. Now, I never ever light anything from the direct behind the camera angle. So once again, I lined up my camera here, shot from over there, and over behind there. I showed you that little tank I lit up before. As much as I could, I got around the building. So I took quite a number of exposures for that. So as far as the light painting shots, I shot those at f4, ISO 1250 for 15 seconds. Why 1250 ISO? Well, I mentioned it before, my torch was running out of power, so I had to boost the exposure somewhere else. I could have extended the shutter speed, but I prefer not to do that. I just wanted to keep the shutter speed short, and so I lit all these different areas. Now, this building over here, I'll show you, is difficult because of the corrugated iron. Now, one of the problems you have when shooting corrugated iron like this and putting light painting onto it is that you have an effect that is known as moire. And moire is this weird shape, an artifact that appears over the scene. Now, these corrugated iron, they're repetitive patterns, and that's what causes moire. It's a problem for photography and video, and you'll see it with people that wear the same repetitive pattern on their shirts or their clothing, and certainly you'll see it on corrugated iron. So to minimise that, I probably just put a minimal amount of light on there to try and hide that. Now, the rest of the scene here doesn't have that same effect, so it's not such an issue here. Now, I spent quite a bit of time here whilst I was light painting and whilst I was shooting this scene here. But you know, I didn't mind that one little bit because I just enjoyed the ambience of the place. Now, a lot of you might say, oh boy, that would be a spooky place to be at night. And to be honest, I heard some birds inside the silo making some noises. There's probably rats in there, who knows what's in there. But it didn't bother me in the slightest because I was out here under the beautiful night sky, Milky Way shining. I mean, really, what could be better than that? And so in the end, I was absolutely delighted with how this shot turned out. And I think you'll agree with me, it was well worth the time spent here at this location. And there you have it, another episode comes to a close. I'm absolutely rapt that you've taken the time to come out and share this experience with me here today. And I look forward to hearing whatever you've got to say in the comments down below. If you'd feel to subscribe to my channel, I'd be rapt to have you on board. So anyway, until I see you next time out under the stars somewhere, you have a fantastic week. I'll see you later.